Anybody can have a belief, an opinion, and anybody can be firm on that belief or that opinion. However, that does not mean that that opinion was founded on the principles of logic and reason and grounds. I can tell you a unicorn exists and be like, man, unicorns are out there. I can believe it as much as I want, but if there's no grounds to it, then it's just not sensible. It's not logical. When we talk about all lives matter, Black lives matter, blue lives matter, let's put the principles of logic to the test. Let's apply reason and ration, because we don't want this. This is what we don't want as a society. You're a cop, you have the blue uniform, so you automatically are blue lives matter. You're a black person, you're black, so you're automatically black lives matter. You're white, you're a white person, you automatically go all lives matter. You're siding just because of your bias and your tradition, and you're not using the key principles gifted to us as humans. Logic, reason, ration. So I'm finna break down all lives matter, black lives matter, blue lives matter, solely from a logical perspective. I'm gonna remove my black bias from that perspective, but my logical bias is still subjective, so don't get it twisted. My take is still biased, but I'm going to use the best objectivity I can possible. So let's start with all lives matter. I'm going to go from least logical to most logical. This is why all lives matter is the least logical. For one, you have to check its essence and existence. Why do we say it now? Because if Black Lives Matter did not come into fruition, all lives matter, we would never have heard it. Because think about how redundant and rhetorical it sounds to say. If you walk across a person in the street and be like, hey man, all lives matter. That motherfucker be like, duh, lives matter. Take away all. It's just saying lives matter. But the general consensus in the world is that lives matter. We all are aware of this. As a fucking baby, you are a life-affirming creature, so you care for life. So to say all lives matter, for one, is already a rhetorical statement. We know this. And then for two, the grounds, the stats, the data. There is no empirical data indicative that suggests that we attack all lives at the same magnitude, or we just have a lack of care for all lives universally. Therefore, the need to say it is null and void. The need to say something that's non-existent in the realm is null and void. So all lives matter is literally the least reasonable. The only reason why we use it is as a weapon to combat somebody else's position of Black Lives Matter. And now we're going to check to see if that applies. But first, we're going to go with blue lives. So you see the rhetoric in all lives and how it's not logical. Anybody who chooses all lives is really siding with their position. But from a logical standpoint, every existing being knows that all lives matter. And from a tangible standpoint, there's not a direct attack on all lives in comparison to some of the subsets. And also, just deductive reasoning. Black lives, blue lives, brown lives, and any life you want to choose all consist of all lives. So when somebody says Black Lives Matter or blue lives matter or any lives matter, you shouldn't have to say all lives because they're a part of that all lives. So you should agree, oh yeah, for sure Black Lives Matter. They're a part of all lives with your premise. You don't have to say all lives matter because when you do that, you're now weaponizing your stance to deflect Black Lives Matter. This is just pure logic. Don't look at me. Now, blue lives matter. The reason why blue lives matter is illogical because tangibly, they are the best represented in court. They have law enforcement to enforce on them in which they are law enforcement. So their team, their system in place, they go up against their system. This is why we see so many not guilty verdicts. This is why we see so many light sentences. This is why when they do the same thing us citizens do, they get way less punishments. So we don't have to say Blue Lives Matter because our system and society is not attacking blue lives. Now, because you're a cop and you say it, you're just using your bias. Again, like I said from the beginning, everybody can have a motherfucking opinion. But if it's just with bias and no grounds, we have to run it through the test of logic and reason and ration. Otherwise, we can eliminate it. We don't need to say Blue Lives Matter because our system protects blue lives. Citizens are not killing cops by no statistical measure. So if you see an anecdote, and this is y'all love empirical. I love both empirical and anecdotal. I respect all the experience, but y'all love empirical. So when you see the little anecdotes of cops getting harassed, that's anecdotal. That's not empirical. There is nothing substantial to say cops are under attack. So with that reason alone, if you can find stats that suggest it, I will recant those statements. But for that reason alone, we don't have to say Blue Lives Matter. So that may be used to combat Black Lives Matter. So now let's get to Black Lives. How logical is that? Is there a need to say Black Lives Matter in the statement? Because we know the organization has been compromised by George Soros. So this is why we should be reticent in even doing Black Lives Matter. But let's just break down the sentence. Black Lives Matter. Is there an emphasis to say it? We cover up 14% of the population, but we're imprisoned at a 40% clip. That's almost 3 times the rate of our existence. So that signifies, I don't know how you guys do math, that signifies a deliberate attempt at imprisoning specific people. Unless you want to think, oh shit, black people are just ignorant. Unless you want to protect that bias again and justify those consistent incarceration rates. Because it's not just today where we make up 40% of the prison population and are only 14. Throughout the history, those numbers will be consistent. The math of racism will be consistent. That's the objective variable. Check the science. Check the prison population rates. Check how we're being unarmed killed, or killed, period. Because again, we have to emphasize Black Lives Matter for those prison rates, because those rates imply the system does not think they matter. When the cops kill us at 3 times the rate in comparison to anybody else, that's an implication that our system looks at us as less than. When white supremacy and the institutions tell you you ain't shit your whole life, that's an implication that somebody thinks we don't matter as much. When the notion of slavery was created and you were 3 over 5, not 5 over 5, you were not whole. You were not whole. You were not a whole person to the society and the system and structure that we live in today. Then there is a reason to say Black Lives Matter. So out of all lives, blue lives, and black lives, just on a logical realm, Black Lives Matter is the only one that's logical. Now, again, like I said, I believe it's logical. Like I said, logically, Black Lives Matter. And it should be noted, because some people have given off the perception, and some systems, all systems have given off the perception that they don't matter. So that's why it should be noted. However, my black people, this is where I got to talk to y'all. That Black Lives Matter movement has been compromised. So the statement means more than the movement. They got Antifa protesters. They have antagonists who have been paid by George Soros, billionaire who don't give a fuck about you, to compromise the integrity of what Black Lives Matter means. And then aside from that, when you say Black Lives Matter, you make it subject to who views it. Black Lives Matter. Now you can give that to a racist and he can just say, no, they don't. So that's not a firm stance as people ourselves, as opposed to Black Power. Now that's self-empowering. Now they can't refute or deny it. They just have to deal with it. When we say Black Power, they just have to deal with it. They can't say no, because then we'll just show you. Oh, no. Now when you say Black Lives Matter and they say no, all lives matter. Now we're in an argument in a world in which we shouldn't even be arguing our existence. We should be expressing it. So for me, the new expression is Black Power. Not Black Lives. We ain't convincing nobody no more. But it's 10 minutes. I want to do it for Instagram. This is just me logically breaking down that all lives matter is senseless to say. Blue Lives Matter is illogical. And Black Lives Matter makes sense, but be